The attic was a space she had avoided for years, a dusty graveyard of forgotten memories. But today it felt different, compelling, almost as if it had been calling to her. As the mother climbed the creaking stairs and entered the dimly lit room, the scent of aged wood and paper filled her senses, evoking a bittersweet mixture of nostalgia and sorrow. She was here to find closure, to clean out the remnants of her late daughter's belongings, though her heart protested with every step she took. Among the cardboard boxes stacked haphazardly in the corner, one box stood out, a small, weathered trunk she didn't recognize, its edges frayed as if it had been opened and closed countless times. With trembling hands, she lifted the lid, revealing an assortment of keepsakes, pressed flowers, ticket stubs, and a worn, leather-bound diary tied with a faded ribbon. She froze, the air around her seeming to still, as she realized what she was holding. This wasn't just any diary. It was her daughter's most personal possession, a window into the thoughts and emotions she had taken with her when she passed away. Unable to resist, the mother sat cross-legged on the attic floor, loosening the ribbon and flipping through the pages. Each entry felt like a fragment of her daughter's soul, a blend of youthful optimism, private heartbreak, and dreams unspoken. But amidst the heartfelt confessions and sketches of sunsets, one page stopped her cold. Drawn carefully in black ink was a map, complete with detailed directions and markings that pointed to a specific, remote location. It wasn't labeled, but the handwriting in the margins was unmistakably her daughter's, filled with cryptic notes like, "Here lies what matters most, and the truth is worth the journey." The map didn't make sense to her. She had never heard of this place, never seen it mentioned in her daughter's life, and the realization struck her hard. There was a part of her daughter she had never known, a side she had kept entirely hidden. Confusion turned to curiosity, and then to guilt. She began to wonder if her daughter had ever intended for her to find this diary. Was it a mistake, or was it her daughter's way of reaching out from beyond, asking her to uncover something she had left behind? As she scanned a page, her mind raced with questions. Why had her daughter kept this map? Was it tied to some secret dream, or perhaps a regret she could never share? The mother's eyes welled with tears as she realized how little she had truly understood her child, how much of her life had remained a mystery despite their bond. She couldn't shake the feeling that this map was important, more important than anything else she had uncovered so far. Turning the pages feverishly, she searched for context, hoping for an explanation that would illuminate the purpose of the map. Instead, she found entries that hinted at a struggle her daughter had faced, one she had never voiced aloud. Phrases like, "If only she could see me for who I am, and someday I'll find my way," jumped out at her, piercing her heart with their raw honesty. The diary wasn't just a collection of memories. It was a chronicle of a young woman searching for meaning, for connection, and perhaps for a place where she truly belonged. And now, that place seemed to be tied to this map, this cryptic guide that seemed to promise answers the mother didn't even know she needed. The attic suddenly felt suffocating, the walls closing in around her as the weight of the discovery settled on her shoulders. She clutched the diary to her chest, feeling its edges dig into her skin as if it were a lifeline tethering her to her daughter's spirit. The map was more than a curiosity. It was a challenge, a call to action that demanded she step outside the confines of her grief and embark on a journey she had never anticipated. But was she ready? Could she truly face whatever truths lay at the end of this path, or would it only deepen the ache she already carried in her heart? As she descended the attic stairs, the diary still in hand, the mother made a silent promise. She would follow the map wherever it led, not just for her daughter, but for herself. She owed it to the memory of the vibrant, complex woman her daughter had been, a woman who had clearly loved deeply and dreamed boldly, even if she had hidden those parts of herself away. For the first time in years, the mother felt a spark of purpose, a reason to move forward beyond the routine of her grief. The map was a mystery, yes, but it was also a gift, a chance to bridge the gap between the past and the present, between a mother and the daughter she had lost too soon. And so, with the map as her guide and the diary as her companion, she prepared to take the first step on a journey that would change everything she thought she knew. The drive home was a blur of thoughts and emotions, the diary resting on the passenger seat beside her, its weathered cover almost daring her to open it again. The mother couldn't shake the feeling that the map was more than a clue. It was a bridge to her daughter's life, a life she had only glimpsed in fragments and fleeting conversations. Back at home, she placed the diary on the kitchen table, surrounded by the familiar hum of her quiet house, and hesitated before untying the ribbon once more. The scent of old paper filled the air as she flipped through the pages slowly, her fingers tracing over her daughter's handwriting as if it might lead her back in time. Each word seemed to carry a weight she had never noticed before, and for the first time, she began to see her daughter not just as her child, but as a person with a life beyond their shared moments. The entries were a mosaic of emotions, some joyful, some heartbreakingly lonely. She read about friendships she had never known existed, fleeting mentions of a boy whose name appeared more than once, and a yearning for freedom that the mother couldn't remember her daughter ever voicing aloud. One entry stopped her cold. "Sometimes it feels like I'm two people, the girl they see and the girl I really am. I wish I could tell her the truth, but I'm scared she wouldn't understand." The words cut deep, unraveling years of assumptions and misunderstandings. Who was her? The mother? A friend? Or someone else entirely? The ambiguity gnawed at her, but it also opened a door to memories she hadn't revisited in years. Memories that, in hindsight, felt like missed opportunities to truly know her daughter. She remembered the arguments they'd had during her daughter's teenage years, those heated moments when they seemed to speak entirely different languages. Her daughter had always been so passionate, so fiercely independent, and the mother had often mistaken that for rebellion. Now, reading the diary, she wondered if she had misjudged her entirely. Perhaps her daughter wasn't pushing her away. Perhaps she was simply trying to carve out space to be herself, to live authentically in a way the mother had never fully grasped. The realization was painful, but was also enlightening, peeling back layers of regret and replacing them with a new determination to understand. One entry in particular seemed tied to the map, though its meaning was still elusive. It described a day when her daughter had taken a long drive to clear her head, ending up at a place that made her feel more alive than ever. The entry was dated 3 months before her daughter's passing, and the words were almost poetic in their description of the place. It felt like the world fell away, like I could finally breathe without anyone watching or judging. I wish I could live there forever. The mother read and reread the passage, her mind conjuring images of a serene, untouched landscape, a sanctuary her daughter had found and kept entirely to herself. She couldn't decide whether to feel hurt that her daughter had never shared this place with her, or grateful that she now had the chance to see it through her daughter's eyes. Her mind wandered to the map again, its hand-drawn lines etched into her memory. She laid it out on the table, smoothing the creases and studying the markings with the intensity of someone searching for buried treasure. It wasn't a detailed map, it lacked names, coordinates, or even a clear destination, but the notes in the margins hinted at a journey rather than a single location. Phrases like "start where the heart begins" and "follow the light, not the road" felt cryptic yet deeply personal, as if her daughter had left a trail of breadcrumbs meant only for someone who truly knew her. The mother traced the path with her finger, feeling a mix of anticipation and trepidation. She wanted answers, but she also feared what she might find. As the hours passed, the diary revealed more than just her daughter's thoughts. It revealed pieces of the mother's own past, moments she had long buried beneath the weight of everyday life. She found an entry describing a family trip to the beach when her daughter was 8 years old, a memory the mother had all but forgotten. She seemed so happy that day, her daughter had written. "But I remember wishing she'd put down her book and just play with me in the water." The words were like a knife to the heart, forcing the mother to confront the ways she had failed to be present, The way she had let her own insecurities and distractions rob her of moments that could never be reclaimed. But it wasn't all regret. There were moments of joy, too. Entries that spoke of laughter shared over burned cookies, late-night talks about the stars, and the quiet comfort of knowing someone was always there, even when words weren't enough. These memories became a lifeline, reminding the mother that her relationship with her daughter, though imperfect, had been filled with love. And as she read on, she began to see the map not just as a mystery to solve, but as a chance to honor the bond they had shared, to reconnect with a part of her daughter that had remained hidden in plain sight. By the time she closed the diary for the night, the mother felt both exhausted and invigorated. The map was no longer just a puzzle. It was a promise, a way to bridge the gap between the past and the present. And as she drifted off to sleep, her mind filled with images of uncharted roads and whispered secrets, she resolved to take the next step in her journey. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it with an open heart, ready to embrace the truth, even if it changed everything she thought she knew about her daughter and herself. The morning dawned with an air of anticipation, the kind that made her heart race despite the stillness of her small, familiar kitchen. The diary and map sat on the counter, their presence both comforting and unsettling, like companions urging her forward while whispering of uncertainties. The mother packed lightly, choosing practical clothing and essentials for what she suspected would be more than just a short trip. She slipped the diary into her bag, its weight oddly reassuring, as though her daughter were traveling with her, guiding her steps from beyond. Her hands lingered on the edges of the map one last time, before folding it carefully and tucking it away. The directions were vague, marked by landmarks rather than specific streets, and yet they felt oddly intuitive, as if the map had been designed to be understood not by logic but by instinct. As she started the car, the engine's low hum echoed in the quiet morning air, blending with the rhythmic thrum of her thoughts. She had plotted the first stretch of her route based on the map's cryptic instructions: start where the heart begins. To her, this could only mean one place, the small town where her daughter had been born, a place they had left behind decades ago, but that still carried the imprints of their early life together. The drive was long, the road stretching endlessly ahead, but her mind was anything but idle. Memories surfaced unbidden, filling the car like ghostly passengers. She recalled the hospital room where she had first held her daughter, the warmth of her tiny hand wrapping around her finger, and the overwhelming sense of purpose that had surged through her in that moment. It was a memory she hadn't revisited in years, and now it felt both distant and immediate, as if time itself were folding in on her. The town appeared on the horizon like a mirage, its familiar streets and weathered storefronts both unchanged and foreign. She parked near the town square, her eyes scanning the surroundings for clues. The map's next instruction, follow the light, not the road, played in her mind like a riddle. Light could mean so many things: the sun, a beacon, or perhaps something more metaphorical. She wandered through the square, letting her instincts guide her, until her gaze fell on an old church at the edge of town. Its stained glass windows shimmered in the morning sunlight, casting vibrant patterns on the ground, and she felt an inexplicable pull toward it. Inside, the air was cool and still, heavy with the scent of polished wood and centuries-old stone. She walked slowly down the aisle, her footsteps echoing in the quiet space, until she reached the altar. There, tucked behind a row of candles, she noticed something out of place: a small wooden box, its surface engraved with a symbol she recognized from the map. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing a folded note in her daughter's handwriting. The message was simple but poignant. "Keep going, Mom. You're on the right path." The words brought tears to her eyes, a mixture of grief and gratitude swelling in her chest. Her daughter had left this for her, knowing she would find it, knowing she would follow. The discovery reignited her determination, but it also deepened the mystery. How had her daughter orchestrated all of this? What had driven her to create this intricate journey, And why had she hidden it until now? The mother left the church with more questions than answers, but also with a renewed sense of purpose. The next leg of the journey pointed her toward the outskirts of town, where the map's cryptic notes hinted at a place connected to her daughter's happiest memories. The road out of town was narrow and winding, flanked by towering trees that seemed to close in around her car, their shadows dancing in the dappled sunlight. The mother found herself reflecting on the nature of happiness, what it meant, how fleeting it could be, and how often it went unnoticed until it was gone. She wondered if her daughter had been truly happy, if the places on this map were sanctuaries where she had found peace, even if only for a moment. The thought was both comforting and haunting, a reminder of how much she had missed while her daughter was alive. Eventually, the road opened up to a wide expanse of fields, their golden hues stretching endlessly beneath the sky. In the distance, she spotted a small, weathered bench beneath a solitary oak tree, a place that seemed to beckon her. She parked the car and walked toward it, the cool breeze carrying the scent of earth and wildflowers. As she approached, she noticed something carved into the wood of the bench, her daughter's initials, intertwined with another set of letters she didn't recognize. Beneath them was a single word: forever. The sight stopped her in her tracks, her mind racing with questions. Who had her daughter shared this place with? A friend? A lover? And why had she never mentioned it? Sitting on the bench, the mother felt an overwhelming sense of connection, as if her daughter were sitting beside her, sharing this quiet moment of reflection. She opened the diary again, searching for an entry that might explain this place, and found one that described a day spent beneath the oak tree, where the world feels far away and nothing else matters. The words were simple but evocative, painting a picture of a sanctuary where her daughter had found solace from the chaos of life. The mother stayed there for hours, letting the stillness seep into her soul. The bench, the tree, the fields, they all seemed to hold a piece of her daughter's spirit, a tangible reminder of her presence even in her absence. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the fields in a golden glow, the mother felt a sense of clarity. This journey wasn't just about uncovering her daughter's secrets, it was about understanding her, about seeing her not just as a daughter, but as a woman with her own dreams, struggles, and joys. With the first pieces of the puzzle falling into place, the mother returned to her car, the map and diary resting on the seat beside her like trusted companions. The next step awaited, its clues as cryptic as ever, but she felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. Her daughter's voice seemed to echo in her mind, urging her forward, reminding her that the journey was far from over. And as the car disappeared down the road, the mother couldn't help but feel that she was moving closer not just to her daughter's hidden life, but to the heart of their unspoken bond. The next morning, the mother woke early, the light filtering through her motel window, casting soft patterns on the worn carpet. The diary and map sat on the nightstand beside her, their presence a constant reminder of the path she had committed to following. Today's destination, as indicated by the next line on the map, where love left its mark, was more ambiguous than the previous ones, and her mind raced with possibilities. Was it a place tied to her daughter's first love? A spot where something profound had happened? The thought stirred a mix of curiosity and apprehension as she wondered what truths might come to light about the parts of her daughter's life she had never been privy to. The drive to the new location was long and winding, taking her through back roads she hadn't seen in decades. Each turn felt like a step further into her daughter's hidden world, a world she had never realized existed. As she drove, she found herself reflecting on her daughter's relationships, those she had known about and those she hadn't. There had been fleeting mentions of friends and crushes over the years, but her daughter had always been private, guarding her heart as fiercely as she embraced life. The mother couldn't help but wonder if that privacy had been a way of protecting herself, or perhaps a sign that she hadn't felt fully understood. Eventually, the road led her to a clearing surrounded by dense woods, the sunlight filtering through the trees in golden shafts. At the center of the clearing stood a small, weathered cabin, its wooden exterior worn by time, but still standing strong. Something about it felt familiar, though she couldn't place why. She parked her car and approached cautiously, her footsteps crunching on the gravel path. The cabin exuded an air of quiet solitude, as though it had been untouched by the world for years, and yet the sight of it filled her with an inexplicable sense of warmth. Inside, the cabin was sparse but welcoming, its walls adorned with faded photographs, sketches, and small trinkets that spoke of a life lived simply but meaningfully. On a wooden table near the window, she noticed a stack of letters bound with twine, each envelope addressed in her daughter's handwriting. Her hand shook as she untied the bundle and began reading, the words on the pages revealing a side of her daughter she had never known. The letters were written to someone named Sam, a name she didn't recognize, and they painted a picture of a deep, enduring connection. Her daughter spoke of love, of shared dreams, and of moments that had brought her both joy and heartbreak. The letters hinted at struggles they had faced together, decisions that had weighed heavily on her daughter's heart, and a bond that had been tested but never broken. One letter in particular stood out, its ink smudged as though tears had fallen on the page. "Sam," it read, "you've shown me what it means to love without fear, to embrace the parts of myself I used to hide. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I'll carry you with me always." The mother's heart ached as she read the words, feeling as though she were intruding on something sacred, and yet she couldn't look away. These letters were a window into a relationship her daughter had never shared with her, a part of her life that had been kept deliberately hidden. She felt a pang of guilt, wondering if her daughter had feared judgment, if she had worried that her mother wouldn't understand. And perhaps, in some ways, she wouldn't have, at least, not then. But now, with the clarity that came from loss and reflection, she found herself yearning to know more, to honor this side of her daughter that had remained a mystery. In the corner of the cabin, she noticed a small chest, its lid slightly ajar as though inviting her to look inside. Within it, she found a collection of items that seemed to tell their own story. A stack of photographs depicting her daughter and Sam smiling together in various places, a pressed flower encased in glass, and a journal that appeared to belong to Sam. The journal's entries mirrored her daughter's letters, detailing the moments they had shared and the challenges they had faced. One passage caught her attention, describing a child they had encountered, a child in need of help who had briefly become a part of their lives. The words suggested that her daughter and Sam had taken the child in, providing a safe haven before circumstances forced them to part ways. The revelation hit her like a wave, leaving her both stunned and deeply moved. Her daughter, who had always seemed so guarded, had lived a life of profound compassion and courage. She had loved deeply, given selflessly, and created a legacy that the mother was only now beginning to understand. And yet, the secrecy surrounding it all raised questions that tugged at her heart. Why had her daughter never spoken of Sam, or the child, or the life she had built outside the bounds of their family? Had she feared rejection, or was it simply too painful to share? As the mother sat in the cabin, surrounded by the remnants of her daughter's hidden life, she felt a profound sense of both loss and connection. This place, this love, this story, it was all a part of her daughter, and by discovering it, she felt closer to her than she had in years. But also left her with a choice: to keep this newfound knowledge to herself, preserving it as a private tribute to her daughter's memory, or to share it with others, opening the door to questions and perhaps even controversy. She decided for now to take the letters and journal with her, carefully placing them in her bag alongside the diary and map. The journey was far from over, and she knew there were still pieces of the puzzle waiting to be uncovered. As she stepped out of the cabin and into the clearing, the sunlight warming her face, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her daughter's life was a tapestry of hidden joys and sorrows, and she was determined to see it in its entirety, no matter where the journey led her next. The drive away from the cabin was heavy with thought, the letters and journal in her bag adding a new weight, not just physical, but emotional. The pieces of her daughter's life were starting to come together, yet they raised more questions than they answered. Her mind replayed the name Sam over and over, wondering who this person had been and why her daughter had kept their relationship a secret. Was it love, companionship, or something more complicated? And the mention of a child, what happened there? Each new detail felt like a revelation and a burden, forcing the mother to confront not only what she hadn't known, but also what she might have missed in her own role as a parent. The map's next clue was simple but cryptic, the crossroads of what was and what could have been. The words felt like a riddle, one that resonated deeply as she tried to decipher their meaning. The journey led her deeper into rural landscapes, where the roads grew narrower and the town sparser. Her GPS was useless now. The map was her only guide, its faded lines and handwritten notes pointing her toward a destination she couldn't yet imagine. After hours of driving, she arrived at a small, unassuming diner perched at the edge of a crossroads. The place looked frozen in time, with its peeling paint, neon sign flickering weakly, and a few scattered cars in the gravel parking lot. Something about it felt significant, though she couldn't explain why. She parked and stepped inside, the scent of coffee and fried food immediately enveloping her. The room was quiet except for the low murmur of conversation and the hum of a jukebox in the corner. She took a seat at the counter, her eyes scanning the room for anything that might connect this place to her daughter's map. It was then that she noticed a photograph hanging on the wall behind the counter, a black and white image of a group of young people standing in front of the diner, their smiles wide and carefree. Her breath caught as she recognized her daughter among them, her arms slung around the shoulders of someone who had to be Sam. They looked happy, almost radiantly so, and the sight sent a pang through her chest. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with a kind face and a curious gaze, noticed her staring at the photograph. "You knew them?" she asked, her tone both gentle and probing. The mother hesitated, unsure how much to reveal, but the words spilled out before she could stop them. "That's my daughter," she said, her voice trembling. "And Sam." The waitress's expression softened, and she nodded knowingly. "They used to come here a lot," she said. "Sam was a regular, and your daughter, well, she brought a light into this place whenever she walked in. They were good together, like they understood each other in a way most people don't." The mother felt tears prick her eyes as the waitress continued, recounting stories of her daughter and Sam, how they would sit in the corner booth for hours, talking and laughing as if the rest of the world didn't exist, how they once helped organize a charity drive for a local family in need, and how they always seemed to make everyone around them feel a little brighter. But then the waitress's tone grew somber. "I think they wanted to do more to make a difference, but life has a way of throwing curveballs. I know they were dealing with something big, something heavy. I always hoped they'd find their way through it." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The mother wanted to ask more, to dig deeper into what the waitress knew, but she sensed there was a limit to how much she could glean from these fragmented memories. Instead, she asked for directions to a place the waitress had mentioned, a nearby community center where Sam and her daughter had been known to volunteer. The community center was modest but well kept, its walls adorned with posters for food drives and local events. As she walked through its halls, she felt a strange mixture of anticipation and dread, unsure of what she might find. A bulletin board caught her attention, its surface covered with photographs, notes, and thank you letters from people whose lives had been touched by the center's work. Among them was a photo of her daughter and Sam, this time holding hands with a young boy who couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Her heart stopped. The boy's face was unfamiliar, but the connection between him and her daughter was undeniable. The photo's caption read, "Making a difference, Sam," her daughter's name, and David. The mother stared at the image, her mind reeling. Was this the child mentioned in the journal? Had her daughter and Sam been caring for him? And if so, what had happened to him? A voice behind her broke her trance. "You must be her mother." She turned to see a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a clipboard in hand. He introduced himself as the center's director and explained that he had known her daughter and Sam well. They were some of our best volunteers, he said, always giving, always putting others before themselves. They had big dreams, but life, well, it doesn't always go the way you plan. The man hesitated, his expression pained. David was a foster child, he continued. Your daughter and Sam took him under their wing when he needed it most. They gave him love, stability, a home, even if it was just for a little while. But the system doesn't make it easy, and in the end, he trailed off, his eyes searching hers for understanding. The mother felt a lump rise in her throat as the pieces began to fall into place. Her daughter had been trying to make a difference, to create a family of her own in the face of obstacles and heartbreak. And yet, she had never shared any of this. Not the love, not the struggle, not the child who had briefly been a part of her life. The man handed her a letter, one he said her daughter had left behind for her, but had never sent. Her hand shook as she unfolded it, her daughter's handwriting leaping off the page. Mom, it began, I hope you'll forgive me for not telling you everything. I wanted to protect you, to protect us. But I need you to know that I love deeply, and I try to do good in this world. Please don't think I kept this from you out of shame. It was out of love. I wanted to carry this burden so you wouldn't have to. Tears streamed down her face as she read the letter, the words cutting through her grief and guilt with a clarity that felt both painful and liberating. Her daughter's hidden life was no longer just a mystery. It was a testament to her courage, her compassion, and her unwavering belief in the power of love. The mother drove away from the community center, the letter clutched tightly in her hand, as though it were the only thing tethering her to reality. Her daughter's words swirled in her mind, a bittersweet mixture of love, apology, and the burden of secrets. The revelations of the day had left her reeling, and as the countryside blurred past her, she realized she was no longer simply following a map. She was navigating a labyrinth of emotions, each turn uncovering truths she wasn't sure she was ready to face. The discovery of David, the boy her daughter and Sam had cared for, left her with more questions than answers, and with them, a profound sense of responsibility. Who was David now? Was he safe? Did he even know how much he had been loved during those fleeting moments in her daughter's care? The thought of a child left adrift in the system, one who had been embraced, if only temporarily, by her daughter's warmth, felt like a weight she couldn't ignore. And yet, she didn't know how to find him, or whether she even had the right to try. Her daughter's letter had asked for forgiveness and understanding, but it had also revealed the depth of her daughter's choices that challenged the mother's own beliefs about family, duty, and love. The next instruction on the map was brief but striking, the place where hearts are tested. It felt less like a destination and more like a warning, as though the journey ahead would demand more from her than anything she had faced so far. The road led her to a small, secluded cemetery nestled among rolling hills, its entrance marked by an iron gate weathered with age. She hesitated before stepping inside, the stillness of the place pressing down on her like a tangible force. Rows of headstones stretched out before her, each one bearing the weight of story, a life, a legacy. The map had guided her to a specific marker, one she found tucked beneath a sprawling oak tree. The headstone was simple but poignant, its inscription reading, Samuel James Harper, a life lived for others. The name struck her like a blow, the realization settling in her chest with a mixture of sorrow and reverence. Sam was gone. The person who had meant so much to her daughter, who had shared her joys and struggles, was no longer part of this world. She knelt before the grave, her fingers tracing the engraved letters as tears streamed down her face. For a moment, she felt an overwhelming sense of failure, not just her own, but the world's, for not recognizing the quiet heroes like Sam who had lived and loved selflessly. And yet, as she sat there, the weight of judgment began to lift, replaced by a deep and abiding respect for the choices her daughter and Sam had made. They had created something beautiful together, even if it had been fleeting, and that beauty deserved to be honored. But the grave held another surprise. At its base, partially obscured by leaves, was a small wooden box, its surface etched with a symbol that matched the one on the map. She opened it with trembling hands, revealing a collection of letters, photographs, and a journal. Sam's final words, left behind as a testament to the life he and her daughter had shared. As she read, the depth of their love and the challenges they had faced became achingly clear. Sam's journal spoke of their decision to foster David, their hope to adopt him, and the heartbreak of losing him when the system intervened. "We gave him all we could," one entry read. "And though it wasn't enough, I hope he carries a piece of us with him, just as we'll carry him in our hearts forever." The journal also revealed their struggles with societal judgment, the sacrifices they had made to live authentically, and the quiet strength they had drawn from each other. The mother closed the journal and sat in silence, the weight of their story settling over her like a blanket. She felt a deep sense of admiration for Sam and her daughter, but also a gnawing sense of inadequacy. Had she failed to create a space where her daughter felt safe enough to share this life with her? Had her own fears and expectations driven her daughter to keep these secrets? The questions lingered, unanswerable yet persistent, forcing her to confront the ways in which her own values and choices had shaped their relationship. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the cemetery, the mother realized she was at a crossroads of her own. The revelations of the journey had left her with a choice: to carry these truths quietly, keeping them as a private tribute to her daughter's courage and resilience, or to share them, risking misunderstanding, but also opening the door to healing and connection. It was a moral dilemma that cut to the heart of her own fears and hopes, challenging her to step outside her comfort zone and embrace the complexities of love and family. She thought of David, of the impact her daughter and Sam had undoubtedly had on his life, even if only for a short time. She thought of the community center, of the lives her daughter had touched through her quiet acts of kindness. And she thought of herself, of the ways in which this journey had changed her, forcing her to see her daughter not just as a child, but as a whole person, flawed, courageous, and deeply human. The decision wasn't easy, but it was clear. She would honor her daughter's legacy not by hiding it away, but by sharing it with those who needed to hear it most. She would find David, if she could, and tell him about the love and hope that had surrounded him during those formative years. She would return to the community center, offering her support to the work her daughter had cared so deeply about. And she would carry Sam's journal and her daughter's letters as a reminder that love, even when it is complicated and fleeting, leaves an indelible mark. As she left the cemetery, the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, their light guiding her back to the road. The journey wasn't over, but she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The map had brought her to a place of understanding, of forgiveness, and of purpose. And as she drove toward the next destination, her daughter's words echoed in her mind: "The truth is worth the journey." The next day, the mother woke with a renewed sense of determination. Her daughter's map had led her through places filled with joy, sorrow, and revelation, but this next step felt different, more urgent, more personal. The map's next clue read simply, "What was lost will be found here." And as she studied the lines and notes that had guided her so far, she realized it pointed toward a town she hadn't thought of in decades. It was a place tied to her own past, not her daughter's, and the realization unsettled her. What connection could this place possibly have to her daughter's life? The drive was long and filled with memories she hadn't revisited in years. This town had been the setting of her own youth, a place where she had dreamed big dreams before life had taken her in a different direction. As she approached its outskirts, the familiar landmarks stirred emotions she thought she had buried: old friends, missed opportunities, and the choices that had shaped her into the woman she had become. Yet, as she drove deeper into the town, another memory surfaced, one she had long avoided. Her thoughts turned to a young man named Daniel, a name she hadn't spoken aloud in decades. He had been her first love, a boy with a kind heart and a restless spirit. Their relationship had been brief but intense, cut short by circumstances beyond their control. She had often wondered what had become of him, but life had moved on, and the memory of him had faded into the background of her busy years as a mother and wife. Now, as she navigated the familiar streets, she couldn't shake the feeling that this part of the journey was leading her back to him. The map directed her to an address on the edge of town, a modest house surrounded by a garden bursting with wildflowers. She hesitated before knocking on the door, her heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. When the door opened, the sight of the man standing before her took her breath away. He was older, of course, his hair streaked with gray, and his face lined with the marks of time, but there was no mistaking him. Daniel. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, the weight of years and unspoken words hanging in the air. Then his face broke into a warm smile, and he said her name like a question, as though he couldn't quite believe she was standing there. "It's been a long time," he said, his voice carrying the same kindness she remembered. The reunion was both surreal and deeply emotional. They sat in his garden, sipping tea and catching up on the years that had passed. She told him about her daughter, her life, and the journey that had brought her to his doorstep. He listened intently, his expression softening as she spoke of the map and the truths she had uncovered along the way. When she finished, he nodded slowly, as though piecing together a puzzle that had long eluded him. "I think I know why you're here," he said, his voice tinged with both sadness and hope. He disappeared into the house and returned with a box, its surface worn with age. Inside were letters she had written to him during their brief time together, letters she had thought were lost. But there was more. Beneath the letters was a photograph of her daughter, standing beside a young boy who looked strikingly familiar. Her breath caught as she realized the boy was David. "How?" she began, her voice trailing off as she struggled to make sense of what she was seeing. Daniel explained that he had met her daughter years ago, though she hadn't known who he was at the time. She had come to him for help with David, seeking guidance and support as she navigated the challenges of fostering a child. "She didn't want to involve you," Daniel said gently. "She was worried about how you might react, about reopening old wounds. But she spoke of you often, of your strength, your love, and the way you had shaped her into the person she wanted to be." The mother felt tears streaming down her face as she listened, the pieces of her daughter's hidden life falling into place with startling clarity. Her daughter had found her way to Daniel, the man who had once been such an important part of her own life, and in doing so had created a connection that spanned generations. It was as though her daughter had instinctively known where to turn, even without knowing the full story. But there was more. Daniel revealed that David had stayed with him briefly after her daughter's death, and though the arrangement hadn't been permanent, he had kept in touch with the boy over the years. "He's doing well now," Daniel said. "He's with a good family, and he's thriving. But I think he'd want to know about you, about the love your daughter had for him." The revelation was overwhelming, filling the mother with both relief and an aching sense of loss. David was safe, but the connection her daughter had forged with him was something she would never fully understand. Yet, as she sat in the garden with Daniel, she felt a sense of closure she hadn't thought possible. Her daughter's journey had been one of love, resilience, and self-discovery, and though it had been hidden, it was now a part of her own story as well. Before she left, Daniel handed her a final letter, one her daughter had written shortly before her death. The words were raw and heartfelt, a testament to the depth of her love and the struggles she had faced. "Mom," the letter read, "I hope you'll forgive me for not sharing this part of my life with you. I was scared, not of you, but of what it might mean to open up. But please know this, everything I did out of love for David, for Sam, and for you. You've always been my compass, even when I strayed. I hope this journey brings us closer, even if it's only in spirit. As the mother drove away from Daniel's house, the sun setting behind her, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey wasn't over, but she was no longer the same person who had begun it. Her daughter's legacy was one of courage and compassion, and now it was her turn to carry it forward. The final destination loomed in her mind like an unanswered question. The map had guided her through places that revealed not only her daughter's hidden life, but also facets of her own past that she had long forgotten. Each stop had brought her closer to understanding, to reconciliation, but it also left her with a growing sense of anticipation. The last clue on the map read, "What remains is yours to carry." Its simplicity was haunting, and she couldn't help but wonder if this final leg of the journey would bring closure or leave her with more questions than answers. The location was deep in the countryside, far removed from any town or city. The roads became narrower and more treacherous as she drove, the dense woods on either side casting long shadows across the path. The directions led her to a clearing where a small, weathered chapel stood, its white paint peeling, and its steeple reaching toward the sky as though in quiet defiance of time. The sight of it filled her with an inexplicable sense of calm, as though this place had been waiting for her all along. She stepped inside, the air cool and still, carrying the faint scent of aged wood and candle wax. The chapel was empty, save for a single table at the front, on which rested a box and an envelope. Her name was written on the envelope in her daughter's familiar handwriting, and the sight of it made her breath catch. With trembling hands, she opened the letter, her eyes scanning the words that felt like her daughter's voice speaking directly to her. "Mom," it began, "if you're reading this, it means you follow the map to the end. I know this journey hasn't been easy, and I can only hope it's brought you closer to understanding the life I lived and the choices I made. I'm sorry I couldn't share all of this with you while I was alive. I was afraid of how you might see me, afraid of letting you down. But I see now that I underestimated you, just as I often underestimated myself. You've always been stronger than I gave you credit for, and I think deep down, I always knew you'd find your way here." The mother's tears fell freely as she read on, her daughter's words both comforting and devastating. Inside the box, the letter continued, "You'll find everything that's left of me, my journals, my photographs, my dreams. These are the pieces of me I couldn't share before, but they're yours now. They've always been yours. What remains is yours to carry, but not as a burden. Carry it as a reminder of love, of resilience, and of the fact that even in our darkest moments, we're never truly alone." She opened the box with a reverence she hadn't felt in years, her hand shaking as she lifted the lid. Inside, she found a collection of treasures, a stack of journals filled with her daughter's thoughts and dreams, photographs of her with Sam, David, and others whose lives she had touched, and a small, intricately carved locket. She opened the locket to find two tiny photographs, one of her daughter as a child, and one of her as an adult, smiling in a way that radiated pure joy. Beneath the journals was a final envelope, this one addressed to someone else, for David. The mother's heart clenched as she realized the letter was meant for the boy her daughter had cared for so deeply. It was clear now that the map had not only been for her, it had been for him as well. Her daughter had intended for this journey to connect them, to bridge the gap between her past and the future she had envisioned for David. In that moment, the mother made a decision. She would find David wherever he was and deliver the letter and the story of her daughter's love. It was what her daughter would have wanted, and it was the only way to honor the legacy she had uncovered piece by piece. As she left the chapel, the box tucked safely in her arms, she felt a profound sense of clarity. This journey had been about more than uncovering secrets. It had been about healing, about understanding, and about the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. Her daughter's life had been one of quiet courage and selfless love, and now it was her turn to carry that legacy forward, not as a burden, but as a gift. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, the mother felt ready to face it. Her daughter's map had led her to places she had never imagined, both physically and emotionally, and it had changed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. As she drove away from the chapel, the setting sun casting a warm glow over the landscape, she whispered a quiet promise to herself and to her daughter. "I'll carry this," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "I'll carry it all." And with that, she turned onto the open road, her heart lighter than it had been in years, and her path illuminated by the love that had guided her every step of the way.